Do you know why the Spartans died out? And not just the Romans killed them and took over their lands in war. Because yes, that's correct, but I mean actually. Because their society was built on being seen as a formidable militaristic culture. They were touted as some of the greatest battlefield tacticians the world has ever seen. But as high society became a thing and Sparta evolved, the Spartans were increasingly an equality-based culture. The women weren't treated like baby factories, and they were allowed to be educated, own lands, and even work those lands. For a society that is literally always at war, that meant dwindling numbers even for a city-state that's seen as unbeatable. And well, you know how their story ends. What does this have to do with sustainability? Well, technically, actually very little, but socially a lot, because by the end, the Spartan power was largely political and their battle prowess was mostly storytelling. They were overrun because they were all talk at the highest levels. And here's where I'm drawing the parallel between today's sustainability culture and the ancient first egalitarian society. If we sit here and talk about the transition and we don't watch the undercurrents of what's happening in the sustainability sector, we are going to be overrun by people and governments that are actively doing harm to the change we want to see in the world. That's what I'm talking about today on Environmental with Dandelion. If this is your first time tuning in, hi, hello, I'm Ob, your host and the chief cultivator at Dandelion Branding, where my team and I make sustainability part of mainstream conversations every week here on YouTube and by helping brands around the world share their sustainability stories. And you? Well, you're the eco-curious baddie that's been called an alarmist hippie your whole life, and now that the world is burning, the I told you so isn't really the flex, right? Now, hold on to your 100% cotton drawers because the planet is hotter than ever, the government is greenwashing, and we're sifting through the chaos to find what really happened in January of 2026. Now, before we do that, tap that like button like it's the only cucumber left in the market, not wrapped in plastic, and let's go. Okay. It's February, which means the world is obsessing over candy hearts and red roses and expensive gifts. And I'm all for a love distraction in this first post-Christmas consumerist holiday. But for the love of all things growing, please stop buying random plastic bullshit. Those fake rose petals you're thinking about spreading around the bed, yeah, they're plastic and also they're scratchy. And those that aren't found clogging up the waterways will be found in random places around your house to haunt you for the rest of your life. And speaking of haunting things, here's a 25-second reality check. Not only was 2025 one of the hottest years on record, the UN just declared now the era of global water bankruptcy and the World Water Attribution. You know, the people who look at the likelihood that climate crisis played a role in severe weather this year. Yeah, it's once again urging us to transition away from fossil fuels and invest in adaptive measures. Which I'm all for, especially since there's a new study out from the Chinese Academy of Sciences headquarters that is literally calling out the air, especially around cities, as a massive method of transport for microplastic pollution. What? Yeah, because there's a lot of plastic in the air, like way more, magnitudes more than we previously thought. But instead of transitioning away from plastic, we're seeing the old technical difficulties excuse. Case in point, France announced in January that their plastic cup ban is postponed until 2030, saying that it's just really challenging to find the alternative. What was that? I think I can hear the lobbyists from my office all the way in the Netherlands. Huh? Tell them it's too hard. We'll keep the fossil fuel monies. Just tell them it's too hard. Tell them it's too hard. Because here's a reminder, not that you really need one. Plastic is a fossil fuel byproduct. Delaying these bans is quite literally protecting the oil industry. And oh, the oil industry. There is so much happening in the energy transition that this podcast has basically turned into a what's he doing now in the power world? And it's all hitting right now because the one big beautiful bill went into action in January. Here's a forewarning. The updates are grim. We're going to quickly talk about Venezuela. And I know you thought you escaped it because we're in a podcast about sustainability. Well, but no, because it's relevant here and maybe it's relevant more here than anywhere else because there is no stability plan. There's not even a shift in the government. Maduro's cronies are still in charge right now. The U.S. literally just wants the oil, and Maduro himself, that guy, did the U.S. oil industry dirty over the past decade, so they made an excuse to go in and get it. And that's not even really news at this point, right? You see, Venezuela has the unfortunate luck that it sits on a whole lot of crude oil, which is the kind the U.S. doesn't have very much of to export right now because the global we used it all. But the U.S. needs that for the non-renewable energy plans that has the USA in its grips right now. Yeah, so the U.S. administration's main budget bill is still subsidizing fossil fuels to the tune of $40 billion and talking about sinking $100 billion into the infrastructure in Venezuela. Hold those numbers in your noggin just for a few minutes, okay? Meanwhile, back at the ranch, i.e. January's fossil fuel conference at the White House, which was actually just an invitation for 47 to watch a dick measuring competition over crude oil, but that kind of just ended up with Chevron kissing ass while Exxon was basically like, yeah, we've tried it there, got our assets seized, and it's actually not feasible for good business.
With respect to Venezuela in particular, we have a very long history in Venezuela. In fact, we first got into Venezuela back in 1940s. We've had our assets seized there twice. And so you can imagine to re-enter a third time would require some pretty significant changes from what we've historically seen here and what is currently the state. If we look at the legal and commercial constructs and frameworks in place today in Venezuela, today it's uninvestable.
But honey, you know they're going to spend those bills anyway and get that oil. Because not only are they pushing for more oil, they are actively railing against renewables. Federal tax credits for solar projects are being eliminated. Projects now have to start construction before the 4th of July to earn credits, which is causing a lot of dangerous rush and regulation pushback. It's also forcing renewable projects to lean into EPA's cuts we talked about in the last episode, and it undermines security in the future renewables energy projects. Additionally, the administration acted to cancel $7.6 billion in clean energy grants for projects in states that voted Democratic. Like only those states. I don't know. Luckily, a federal court stopped the unconstitutional action, but not before Russell Vought, the White House budget director, said in a, which is now deleted social media post, the left's climate agenda is being canceled. Like what agenda? The bipartisan plan where we save people and the planet from like unprecedented disaster? Oh my God. And this is just January. It's just January. It doesn't even stop there because 47 also called offshore wind farms, although he called them windmills like some Don Quixote bullshit where he's the anti-hero. I don't know. Losers. But anyway, they lose money. They destroy landscape. They kill birds. Like, okay, buddy, I don't think we should play the who's worse in the energy game, especially when we're talking about landscapes or losing money. Consider the experts literally just told you that going to Venezuela is not a good business idea, but he's like strong-arming them anyway. Okay. The USA attacks on climate resilience don't stop here. They still don't stop. How is this even legal? Although I guess it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter anymore. The EPA will no longer consider the economic cost of harm to human health from particles and ozone. They literally are choosing to ignore the death bill of air pollution. Bridget Hirsch, you know that lady that called us the climate cult last month? Yeah, well, she says that they're still considering health benefits. And by my sources, yes, she did say benefits. I double and triple checked that shit. They're just assessing it without a dollar amount. Red flag, America, red flag. In case you're new here, in late stage capitalism, everything is money. That means they're not assessing this anymore. Plus, there's a move to dismantle NCAR. No, not NASCAR. NASCAR is fine. I'm talking about the National Center for Atmospheric Research, because according to Mr. Vau, who, I don't know why he keeps talking, but I guess he has the president's ear right now. The NCAR is one of the largest sources of climate alarmism. I mean, I think it's just science and all the alarms are going off because, climate change is a really big problem costing millions of lives. And to put it in terms they understand, trillions of dollars a year. Even the endangered species list is endangered. This administration is taking pot shots at the list of animals critically endangered, calling it a Hotel California without any regard to the fact that the list itself is not the problem. Not valuing life and taking care of native species is the problem. It sucks that we even need this list because people and our actions destroy habitats, and that just kills stuff. Anyway, they want to dismantle it as much as possible because the protected animals on the list make data center and pipeline developments harder. That's not actually a quote, but it is a very real paraphrase. Okay, but there is good news in the rest of the world. Don't worry. Things are not this dire everywhere. In the Amazon, stingless bees were just granted legal rights. These are the first insects in the world to be rights-bearing subjects. They have the right to exist and to flourish. Take that endangered species list. While the US is doing a retreat into imperialism, the rest of the world is doing science. In fact, Science.org's 2025 Breakthrough of the Year was announced, and it is the unstoppable growth of renewable energy. Quote, this year, renewables surpassed coal as a source of electricity worldwide, and solar and wind energy grew fast enough to cover the entire increase in global electricity from January to June. That's rad. It should also provide a modicum of clarity around the energy stuff from earlier, right? Yeah. In both China and India, coal power saw its first decrease since the 70s. And yeah, it was a small decrease, okay? But that is attributed to the renewables that they're working on, which is meeting an increased demand and cutting into current standards. Also, the UK is hitting almost 3/4 of their power using renewables. The final numbers will be out in a couple of months, but that is hella promising for independence in the energy sector before this decade is out. And Europe, the Commission to the European Parliament, the Council, and the European Economic and Social Committee, and the Committee of the Regions, so many words, are literally touting now as Europe's independence moment. Literally, the working group put out a 40-page document plan, and it states, Europe's moment is now. And together we'll build a secure, prosperous, and independent Europe, one that delivers for its people and leads with confidence in the world. Okay, honestly, this reads like AI with drama and basically no editing, but it's still fine. Now, for me, it's a little scary to see large world powers move towards this type of independence, but I also see the necessity here because the EU is literally caught between Russia and the US, and Europe is actively trying to stop buying Russian fuels, but it means it has to come from somewhere else. And last June, leaders decided to make a deal with the USA to buy their energy for a while, which I personally think is why 47 thought it was okay to threaten Greenland because he thought he had NATO by the balls. But here we see that the EU isn't thinking like that at all. They smartly, I think, see the US deal as a transition while they work on the EU moment. I'm seeing initiatives like circular economy, electrification, energy efficiency, climate policy objective as part of the EU moment, even if defense and security is part of this beef up too. This episode leaves the question, can we make this change without the USA? What do you think? Put it down in the comments. Can we do it? Now, when I'm sitting here alone in my little room writing these episodes, I personally feel like I'm Sparta's last stand. I'm trying to help you connect the dots between random global politic moves and the absolute lack of climate accountability. The constant attacks systematically taking apart sustainability in the USA and the world are disheartening, and that's intentional. They want us to watch the US climate crash out and lose hope. Not to mention, like I have said so many times here, that on a global scale, businesses with sustainability at the core are the ones that make a difference. But there is an obvious Sparta level flaw there too. Eco-curious audiences aren't impulse buyers. We're suspicious, we're discerning, and we don't spend as often. Couple that with today's economy where people vote with their money before their morals, it feels like we're up shit creek with no paddle. We're being outbid, outbought, and maneuvered against at the highest level. Do I think we can make a global transition without the USA? No, I don't. I think if the USA wasn't actively undermining climate resilience and renewable energy in a bid to keep its title as a global power, or if the world wasn't beholden to or being blackmailed by the US government, Epstein files, client list, we might have a chance. But that just isn't the world we live in. And I'm not just saying that because I'm American. I'm saying that because I'm not just an American. Even though I live in Europe, the USA is a huge part of our news feed. And maybe it's because it's a dramatic shit show most of the time. That's a big reason, but also because the politics and economics in the US have massive impacts on us. Europe has basically had an open trade agreement with the United States since all the countries got rich through the slave trade hundreds of years ago. And we have been allied since the last big world war. And very suddenly, the US is pulling back, implementing random tariffs, ignoring agreements, and threatening force in allied countries. I know this is a sustainability podcast, but let's look at the whole playing board through this lens for a second, guys. At a time when science, data, economics, politics, and business are all saying that we should step together and combat this oncoming crisis, the USA is shutting borders, grabbing power and energy wherever possible. They're stepping out of agreements. I could sit here and say that one man's dementia is causing him to irrationally fear the world, and everyone else is part of some insane cult. But this isn't just one guy or even one part of the government. And look, I'm just a lady on the internet again, but I'm seeing a nation whose government is actively preparing for war. They've already started getting us used to seeing random seizures, violence, and government sanctioned murders by the street in ICE. As of this recording, they've only just stopped talking openly about an attack on Allied land, but I don't think we've seen the end of that. I don't think they're coming back into the climate fold anytime soon. I just don't think so. So how do we do this without the USA on board? Well, because I'm a Spartan, go green if you know, you know. And I'd rather go down fighting than to give up on leaving the world better than I found it. Right here, you and I, and our eco-curious ways, we are sowing seeds of dissent. I dare you to send this podcast to your favorite American. I freaking dare you. This past year has been a massive blow to the sustainability sector, and the world is reeling. But we're also seeing a new precedent that will blow up in the face of the USA. Make them not matter. Leave them out of plans. It's like that one friend who's like always in charge of the plans, but then they move away, but all the other friends keep hanging out. And it's awkward at first because there's like no boss, but it actually levels the playing field and stuff gets more fun. But that literally is what happened at COP30. Countries around the world are making very real plans to step into their own energy independence with renewables, and some of the world's largest economies are mobilizing around climate finance in a more circular economy. Businesses, including businesses in the USA, are already changing their supply chains to be more transparent and sustainable. It won't be long before there's no choice. Do it sustainably or don't do it. Let's also be clear. I stand by people being the hope for our future. Like I talked about in last month's news episode, while our systems need changing and there are people in power who, for lack of a better word, suck. They suck. There are also people who are dedicated to the sustainability cause working from the inside. These changes are coming whether the USA is dragging their feet or they're a pioneer in this. If they want to stay relevant on a global scale, they have to join. Until then, we need to build infrastructures that work. We need to invest in climate science and maybe offer asylum to American refugees. That's probably the best thing we could do right now. Okay. Was that as intense for you as it was for me? I mean, if you are completely politicked out, go listen to the episode with Adrian Ferrero about how rewilding and going outside can change your life, or maybe just take a break outside. I will put that episode on the screen right here so you can find it easily next to the little circle with me in it so you can subscribe really easily. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for everything you're doing, and I will see you next time.